The New York Times is reporting some new details in the response to the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas. So now, police are facing criticism after they refused to rush into a classroom to engage a shooter, 18-year-old Salvador Ramos. Now, the Times reports that officers who arrived at the scene came in from at least 14 different agencies but did not go into the classrooms, as sporadic gunfire could be heard inside, nor after 911 calls began arriving from children inside. So, of course, that's why police are being investigated right now, their response. You had over 140 officers outside, 19 outside of the classroom itself, where you could hear gunshots, and where you had dispatchers taking calls from frantic children that were hiding. In fact, one of them, those calls came from Chloe Torres, a 10-year-old student, who had called 911 dispatchers and said that one of the two teachers in her classrooms had been shot and was in urgent need of medical attention. That teacher, of course, subsequently succumbed to her wounds. This happened at exactly 12:10 p.m. Here's her call. She said, quote, "There's a lot of bodies. I don't want to die. My teacher is dead. My teacher is dead. Please send help. Send help for my teacher. She is shot, but still alive." Again, referencing one teacher who was killed initially, and then the other teacher in the classroom who had been shot, but at the time was still alive. So now, as I said, the timing here, 12:10. That's about 37 minutes after the gunman began firing into the classrooms. She had actually stayed on the line for about 17 minutes, and around 11 minutes into the call, according to the dispatchers, the sound of gunfire could be heard on the tape. Eventually, the officers who breached the locked classrooms with a janitor's key were not a formal tactical unit, according to a person briefed in the response. So now, I originally thought that this was a tactical unit that had come in from Customs and Border Patrol. So now there were Customs and Border Patrol agents inside, but it turns out that this was an ad hoc group of officers that decided, yeah, we're not going to wait anymore. In fact, now, we've already been out here for a very, very long time, but let's go back in. Let's actually go in now. So I'll give you the details on that. The officers, including specially trained Border Patrol and Immigration Customs Enforcement agents and a sheriff's deputy, formed an ad hoc group on their own and gathered in the hallway outside the classroom. A tense space where they said appeared to be no chain of command. They were done waiting for permission, one of them said, according to the person, before they moved toward the classroom where the gunman waited. They continued even after one of them heard a command in his earpiece saying, "Do not breach." So that, of course, came from Chief Arredondo. Now, they ignored that, went into the room, and engaged the gunman. So, again, recap here. What we know, they were ordered not to go in. There was no chain of command. Everything was chaos. Don't go in, don't go in, don't go in. And they're like, no, we'll go in. After, again, a very, very long time. Now, Arredondo, getting to him, he just took political office. He was elected to the city council. Now, he came in and called the situation contained, and then refused to answer any questions afterwards. Now, I've argued before that he has absolutely no good answers. Like, for example, why was a guy who ran a 6-member police force in charge of the over 140 officers that were on the scene? Why didn't he hand over control to the bigger departments when they arrived? Why didn't the bigger departments assert control over the situation and then order them to go in sooner? Why didn't the school police officers have keys on them to all the rooms? Why did they have to track down the janitor and get their keys? You would think that you would have the keys as the school police officer. Now, another police officer, Chief Solomon Cook of the Humble Independent School District Police Department. This is a department in the suburbs of Houston. I don't know if that's important context, but Um, there it is. Here's what he told the New York Times. He says, quote, all my people carry keys. So why didn't they? Why didn't they do so in Uvalde? What happened? I mean, again, he should have had keys, and they should have been able to get right into that room as soon as that person started shooting. But no. And by the way, to Arredondo, why did he ignore the dispatchers? The reports of all the children that were stuck inside the classroom. Now, he didn't have a radio. Did their officers that were with him, did they also not have radios? Were they just all completely undergeared? They didn't have any of the stuff that they needed? Come on. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that. Again, the school itself, by the way, had all sorts of lockdown measures. They acted immediately after the gunman started approaching the school. There were alerts, text messages, emails. There's an app. Can you believe that there's a school shooting app? I'm not kidding. I couldn't imagine this stuff when I went to school. Having an app where you can do a school lockdown and report a shooter, an active shooter? Come on. But they had that, and there were alerts, text messages, emails, a plan involving two-way radios with certain key members of staff. But all of that stuff, what good did all of that do? Apparently, not at all. It did nothing. It did nothing. The police themselves also not prepared at all. Chief Arredondo, again, as I mentioned, he had no police radio. He arrived at 11:35. About 3 minutes after the alert lockdown was issued, and about 2 minutes after the 911 call came in from the outside. At 11:37, a lieutenant and a sergeant from Uvalde Police Department approached the door. They were grazed by bullets. Well, they should have known. They should have went back in. That was protocol. Doesn't matter. You rush in during an active shooter event. But Arredondo said, oh, it's not an active shooter event. We need to contain them. Contain them. Shortly after that, Chief Arredondo called in the department with his phone, requesting a radio, a rifle, and heavily armed officers. Basically, backup. And then they just sat there. And they just sat there and waited right outside the room and did absolutely nothing. Shortly after noon, nearly half an hour after the first police officers had arrived, Chloe was calling that 10-year-old student. She was calling the police over and over and over and over again. By then, as the Times note, the first tactical teams had arrived along with officers carrying long guns. Scores of other officers were outside, but those people were busy handcuffing parents, tackling them, as well as getting their own kids out, and then finally getting other kids out through windows from other classrooms. And yet the 19 officers stacked outside the door were just waiting for instruction. And waiting. Finally, one person who was briefed in the team's response said, quote, they were getting frustrated. No one entity or individual seemed to have control of the scene. It was chaos. Absolute chaos. And after more than an hour, the ad hoc group of officers who had arrived ready to attack the gunman had grown impatient and decided to move in. One of the members, equipped with an earpiece and a small microphone, announced over the radio that the group was preparing to go into classrooms. At that point, a voice responded, telling them not to breach the doors. They then ignored the directive, shot and killed Ramos. At one point during the siege, one of the two children who called 911 had reported that at least 8 or 9 of the children in the 2 classrooms were still alive. And of course, at the end, the bodies of 19 children were recovered, along with those of the 2 teachers. 17 people, including a 3rd teacher, were wounded. Chloe's mother, Jamie Torres, told the Times, I don't understand why somebody did not go in. children and teachers would have still been shot, but it would have been way less than 21. And that's really the heart of the issue. What you had here was a complete breakdown of communication and control. Nobody knew what the hell they were doing. All those cops there, and nobody could figure out what to do. Nobody followed any of the standard protocol. Oh no, don't want to step on your toes, Uvalde Police Department. Oh no, can't do that. No, we're just going to leave these people in charge who have no idea what they're doing. Ridiculous. Real absolute shit show. Again, disaster. Breaking a protocol. And extreme cowardice. That's what you're going to find here. All these people are dead. These children are dead. 78 minutes they waited. And children bled to death during that time. How many could have been saved? How many could have been saved? That said, we're talking about the response here, right? We're talking about the police and how they royally effed up. But at the same time, we're going to talk about that. We also need to talk about what we should do to prevent the next thing from happening. Because obviously you can't count on the cops. You're going to sit outside for 78 minutes and not do a damn thing. No, what you have to do is you have to find a way to prevent this from happening. Oh, but how can you prevent this? Or what specific gun laws could we actually ever do? I don't know. Look at every single other industrialized modern nation. They might have a couple of ideas, because they don't have the level of mass shootings that we have here in this country. We have a mass shooting pretty much every single day. And you're saying that we can't do a damn thing about it? You're saying that we can't copy some of the laws from other places that have actually been able to stop mass shootings from happening? Just about all of them. It's incredibly rare when it happens. That's why it's a national tragedy. We have a national tragedy every single day in this country. And you're saying we can't do a goddamn thing about it? Bullshit. I don't believe it at all. What you do is you try to stop people from getting a gun, stop people like Ramos. And yeah, you're not going to stop them all. Doesn't mean we can't try. Doesn't mean we can't try to stop most of them. Which is, again, what other countries try to do. Prevention is literally the simplest solution. Because what we saw here is a reaction and an incredibly failed reaction. No, the best way to stop this is prevent it from happening in the first place. Sadly, knowing our political system as it is, anything that would actually go to try to prevent this won't go into effect. It's the least likely to happen.